Any other comments on that topic? Awesome. Then let's make a shift over. I actually kind of want to take this more to a purpose driven culture and social impact. I think one of the things that we've started to drive forward in the last 6 months is feedback as a gift. And I think we're starting to see more and more of that across the board in our marketing and our sales efforts, along with conversational commerce. It's how we're pitching to investors. It's how we're thinking about the business and how we're moving forward with the technology. I think what's interesting is you have to lead by example with that. So as we talk about it to the external world, I think we're trying to lead by example internally. And, you know, the question, and maybe I'll start with you, Mark, because operationally, I think you've done a phenomenal job on, getting the team together and working together toward process. I think businesses have a really tough time putting new process in place and getting people to adapt to it. And one thing that I find rewarding, but also impressive, is how well you get the team to work toward a common goal, and to do that by adding more processes. So I think for me, culturally, how do you think when you put a new process in, when you think about it with the team and so forth, how do you start to get that adaptability culturally and so forth, whether it's getting feedback from your team, whether it's pushing feedback? How do you think about that, and how do you think about that process to be able to get more process or better feedback from your internal team?
Yeah, I think the first thing is people have to be able to criticism or negative feedback on kind of what is currently in place. And sometimes that's hard, right? Because I think people are very proud of the work that they do. So maybe they take that as a reflection on what they're doing. And I think the change statement is no, like the company's evolved, if we were here and now we're here, right? And so the business will kind of mature and evolve as that goes, right? So I think it's kind of, at first I always found there's a bit of friction, right? And I think what it is kind of lead by example and get a few wins in there. And those wins are really tied to, okay, as a team, we all win. So what's in it for you? What's in it for me? Right? Like I think sometimes these things can be scary, but if you're kind of positioning it that you're trying to make that employee's role better, or kind of get them out of maybe some of these administrative tasks to get them doing more of these analytical or more value add tasks. I think if you can get a few kind of wins in there, I think I think that's really beneficial. I think the other thing too with some projects, and we've all kind of learned this, is don't boil the ocean. And I think really taking those kind of bigger visionary projects and kind of breaking them down into bite-sized pieces. And I think as you kind of do that, you get more success out of the gates, right? Because people can kind of see things happening more regularly, but also too, it then starts to take on a compounding impact, right? And I think as people kind of start to see this, and I see that across our teams, like kind of throughout the organization, is they kind of latch onto it, right? Like if you kind of look at the AI tools we've given to the staff, they latch onto it. At first, maybe they're not sure how they're going to use it, but then we show them how other people in the company are using it. And then there's kind of an excitement around it, right? Or, something that used to take some of our staff hours to do, we automate it. So that frees them up, right, to kind of do some more interesting work. I think they get excited about that, and then they start coming to the table and bringing new ideas. And so it just kind of, in my opinion, takes on a multiplier effect in the organization. I think we've seen that with our teams internally.
Yeah, that's good. And I what I'd like to do, because that is a really good operational question. And now, Ravi, I kind of want to position to you a little bit. So with Ambassador, it, and I think in the industry too, it started as a very complex platform. Still has components of complexity. I mean, I think we all would agree with that, right? And I think one thing that we recognize is in the SaaS space, there are a lot of complex problems, but I think the user is becoming more simplified. And it's to what you said, John, earlier, where the customer just wants what's right in front of them. They just want it. They want to be able to use it. They want to engage with it. And I think one exercise that you brought to us, Ravi, which I don't think anybody has ever done yet, is really going, how do we simplify this? How do we bring it down to its core function and make sure that the client is actually getting what they need to be able to offer to the customer? How do you process that? How do you think about that? One, from a product standpoint, but then also how do you change the mindset of a team as well to think about that? So, from the highest level, how do we think about that from a product? How do you take a complex product and make it more simple? And then the second piece is, how do you then get a team to think like that as well, whether it's new technologies, whether it's a different mindset? How do you address the same things culturally?
Yeah, we're in a very fortunate situation, Ambassador, where we have the luxury to think about where we are today and how and actually invest in how to make it much better. And that's our sort of 2.0 to 3.0 effort, right? And I think you're asking me the question, I think in the context maybe of that exercise. And I think I would say simplifying something has to typically is best started by really stepping back and, as John said, really looking at it again from the end user perspective, right? What is the product doing today, and how do those actually break down into the different use cases that the product supposedly solves? Because if you take, often complexity happens because of how a product solves a particular set of problems, not necessarily what the product's trying to achieve. If you separate out okay, what is the business benefit that you're trying to derive, the how, from, sorry, not the how, the what, away from how it's actually implemented, then that actually starts allowing you to, I think, start looking at things at a level that doesn't get mired in all of the debt you might have accumulated over time, right? Which typically is where complexity originates from, right? It could be tech debt, it could be things related to just legacy capability. And that, I think, is the single biggest thing that we've been able to do in the last few months, right? Is really look at, okay, well, what is the product trying to achieve? What does it do well? And how do we layer on in a very structured, user-centric way the other capabilities we want to add in? And then stepping back and saying, okay, how do these now unified set of use cases then get fulfilled by potentially not just the product we have today, but what are the changes we need to actually make architecturally in sort of that, again, in an incremental way? Because, and that's the critical thing here, right? Because as I think, Mark, you mentioned, right, even in an effort like this, you may end up in an overwhelming situation where you have all these use cases you need to go deliver. But how do you then peel that layer sort of such that, it's sort of incremental? How do you go figure out what is the most important thing to do? And that often comes through internal experience that's been accumulated, but it's also reaching out to the customer base, really thinking through what does the customer really want, and getting their feedback and getting them involved in the process. So that's I think the two-pronged approach, right? One is really thinking about it from the end user perspective, trying to identify not just what the product does today for that end user, but what does the product want to do tomorrow? And then stepping back from the bottoms up approach to really figure out, okay, what's the re-architecture, redesign, sort of reprioritization of capability that needs to happen, and what sequence that needs to happen to best deliver the maximum business value, sort of from release to release. So,
And how do you get the team?
sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, after you.
I just was going to say, and how do you get the team, who's been working on this and building this? And I think a lot of the time the team's been just kind of, fixing things here and there. But how do you get the team to think that, maybe simplification in a platform when complexity can be such a beaming light because you're just doing more, right? How do you get a team to think about, no, less is actually more? How do we get this thing tighter and tighter and tighter? How do you get a team to focus on that culturally?
I think the number one thing you have to do in an effort like this is you got to get the team to at least have a shared goal, right? They need to have some sort of distant marker that, okay, we're trying to do something that is revolutionary, but yet structured, and you got to understand that sort of the vision. You have to sell them the vision first, right? But to form the forming of the vision itself shouldn't necessarily pop out of thin air. The more you can engage the team in building that vision, either by engaging folks on the front end that are intimately involved with the customer base, or whether it's the engineering team that understands all of the skeletons and all the difficulties that they face today, right? You have to build sort of the bridge between typically those two ends of the spectrum, figure out what that vision is, and then you really break down the vision into sort of really an executable roadmap. And that exercise being done with the team is what gets, I think, often the right buy-in necessary that you need in order to kind of embark on something like this.
I think communication's key, right? Like I think how people look at problems or solutions is very different. Like I think my operations team thinks quite differently than say the engineering team, but kind of bringing them together. Sometimes you get those moments of aha between the two groups trying to problem solve together. And I think, Ravi, that's stuff that I think you've recently implemented that I think has been really effective, and you can kind of see it building between the two groups, from solutions, but also just from an excitement level within the organization, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it comes back down to where teams also may tend to get overwhelmed is, oh my God, there's so much to do. Right. And so I think that's where going from the vision to the roadmap to then the right kind of sort of breakdown of things into components, then into sort of releases, and then into the sprint. So you start making it actionable on a, not just on a quarterly basis, but on a day-to-day basis. Right. And that's, I think, what often dislodges teams into actually creating momentum. Once they actually see things happening, then I think, that adds further momentum to the whole process.
Yeah, and taking it from the operating and product side, maybe John, when we look at the external market and as we talk to investors, it's people that are interested in the company. It doesn't have to be an investor, but it can be just marketing people, partners, whatever it is. How do you create a feedback loop from them that is actually effective in the business, where it's not distracting the business, but it really formulates to the strategy of it, right? So how do you, because there's a lot of disruptive things out there. I mean, we're all bombarded with a bunch of information and content and what's real, what's not, what do we believe, what don't we believe. And as I said, our tagline is really feedback is a gift, and we love getting feedback. I think that's one thing that Ambassador really sets Ambassador apart. We've heard it from our clients too. I think for me, John, my question then to you is, how do you decipher between what feedback you should be taking, what feedback, maybe you should kind of parking lot, and, how does that build into, a culture?
Yeah, just so I understand what you're asking, the conversations from investors or partners or other people that have maybe some abstract ideas, bigger ideas, and everybody's got an opinion, right? So you're saying, how do you not get distracted with all this feedback that is very much welcomed? God, I've been dealing with this for a long time. So all the board members, they all got their opinions. Every investor, every VC has got their opinion, different stage of investors, seed, A, B, etc. I am very guilty of thinking very in the sky, too big at times, but it comes down to first things first. And as Ravi, you were just saying, is you got to have a shared goal. We're going in this direction, right? I had Scott Maxwell of OpenView Ventures tell me one time, he goes, John, sales sells what's on the truck. Marketing markets what's on the truck. Business development, that's the tip of the spear. That's where we're going. You got to have that intuition. You got to listen to people. You got to figure out patterns. You got to work with partners. And then a couple years later, he actually shared with me, he's like, I need you to speak up more in the boardroom about like, where are we going? And so what happens in the boardroom is a lot of different ideas and a lot of different opinions. And sometimes it gets, a little feisty in there. But then from my experience, you always come back to first things first. How do we get to that point? You work backwards. And then you know what you have to do, but you have that shared vision like Ravi's talking about. And it's good to think big. You got to think big. That's how ZipWhip, we wanted to own text messaging on the internet in 2007. People are like, what do you mean? But that's what we wanted to do. We were set out to go do it. And then we wanted the text to enable all the business voice lines that never had text capability. And people are like, what are you talking about? Why? And it came back to the consumer. So it took us many years. It was like a 15-year overnight success. But I love big ideas. I love feedback from everybody. I do value it as a gift. And a lot of times you'll hear that feedback and you'll think through it and you'll be like, that was good information, but that's not where we need to go. Here's why. So it really comes back to just working backwards and just making sure that every day you come in, because winning momentum begets momentum, winning begets winning. And I heard you earlier, Mark, just say from an operational standpoint, if you can get a few wins under your belt, a few more wins are going to come. And you celebrate those wins on a weekly basis. We had Gourmet Lunch Friday. Every Friday, we'd bring up people from customer success, product, engineering, business development, and share their stories. Salespeople would talk about the big win, and everybody contributed to that win.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even like some of the feedback, like even like those wins, like now it's like we've got a number of our systems connected. We get a 5 out of 5 on our CSAT that like the team is really happy about that, right? Or we get a G2 review like you were just talking about at our all hands today, Jeff. Like the team gets excited, right? Because it's like even just celebrating internally, it's actually kind of nice to see your customers in some form celebrating as well and acknowledging it. Like it's just it has a very positive momentum everywhere.
That's a good segue to the last thing here, because I know we all got things to do and so forth. But everyone, let's go around the horn. What are you most excited for about Ambassador right now? And I'll start with you, Mark. What are you most excited for when it comes to Ambassador right now? I mean, you and I have been through the drudges for the last couple of years and so forth. I think we've seen a lot of successes, but I think we've also, had our failures, and we've had to, pick ourselves up and move on. I'm pretty, just kind of seeing this, 2025 seems to be a year of real strong growth, some real big opportunities and so forth. And I'm just curious from you, who really make sure all the trains are on the track and they're on time and they're going to the right places. What excites you about Ambassador?
Yeah. Well, overall, it's the strategy, right? And I think maybe why you and I have been kind of like you call it the dredges is I think we've been looking to kind of materialize this strategy for a number of years. And I think what I'm seeing now is that momentum really taking on a whole new speed. Like I think, as you kind of like, we were just doing this a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at the year over year performance, right? And we've constantly seen that improvement, but you are starting to see an acceleration, right? And I think that's really exciting, right? It means that we're making the right investments. I think we're making the right moves. And I think that our teams are kind of latching onto it, which is also helping with the acceleration. So that's kind of what gets me excited, right? Because I'm seeing things in the company just kind of start to happen at a rapid hyper speed, right? Which, I think is just that compounding effect. So to me, that's what's getting myself really excited about 2025 as an organization overall.
That's good. Ravi, what kind of gets you? You've been with us for a little bit. I've known John longer than I've known you, but you kind of have been in the trenches. You've been uncovering every layer of the onion when it comes to product and tech and client calls and customers and everything. What excites you about Ambassador, or what kind of motivates you to kind of see, okay, this is what I'm kind of seeing on the horizon?
I think that's easy for me because it's been amazing to see how much Ambassador has accomplished with the product that you have today. And me coming in, sort of really uncovering some deficiencies, but also identifying sort of how to take it to and get it to the next level to actually fulfill the vision that you guys have crafted. To be able to see some of that, albeit still on some of it on paper, but to be able to see that come together. To me, the most exciting moment is when we have our first version of the new platform in place, right? That I think is, and I've heard several folks, I've heard you, Mark, say this, right? Can't wait to see the new UI, for instance, right? I mean, and we haven't even got that far yet. I think that's what's sort of driving all of us. We see it coming together, but the moment that actually hits the I guess the laps of your sales folks, that will be an exciting moment.
That's good. John, what are you looking forward to? I know you and I are part of the front lines a lot of the time. So we see some of the excitements, we see some of the, feedback and so forth, but what excites you about Ambassador?
First of all, it's the people. The fact that I get to work with so many of the people I worked with in the past from ZipWhip, where we had a big win and we're choosing to come back together and go do it again. It's fun. And it's more fun today for me than ever because I had all these learnings from the past. And now we're on, the horizon, the forefront, the future of AI. And, it was 4 months ago, Jeff, where I had that experience with a voice AI that just blew my mind. And I said, that was good. I want to do that again. And I shared it with about 100 people. And then we found out, like, what's driving all that? Well, let's go do that. Let's go get people in meaningful conversations. And then we came up with feedback as a gift, because it is. And I just want to get more feedback on the products from our customers and from consumers and be first to market with something that is of extreme high value to both consumers, but also to customers, our customers. So wear the customer shoes, but also wear the consumer shoes, and just be part of those trends and those patterns and work with partners. And then it all sits on the data. And so as we collect more data from customers and consumer, we can just get so much smarter. So it's all about the feedback. And I like that we've embraced that as a company. And it's just going to be pretty much, I think, an acceleration curve throughout the year where the whole company just gets on board with the new platform coming together with some of the newer stuff that we got this vision on. And by the end of the year, it's all going to coalesce, and it's going to be a pretty dreamy situation for a lot of us here that are part of something very, very big. And we're in inning number 1.
Yeah, on the heels of that, and I'll end with this comment. Mark, you had said it where it feels like the momentum's picking up, and I'll use what John says: momentum on momentum, right? And I think what's been rewarding to me is, Mark and I and the company has, we've been working along, and we've been doing the things necessary to get up the platform and the company to a scalable part and get it to a scalable business. I think what was really rewarding was the minute that we got introduced to you, John, and then Ravi, and then Kirsten, and then Lapik, and then Hank, and then and all these people, and how they just pick you up and the wind just hits your sails. So to you, what you're saying, Mark, I mean, I thought I ran fast. I thought Mark ran fast. But having the wind with Ravi and you, Larson, and others, it's only picking up steam. And what's been really great is it's not the kind where you're like, plug the boat, do this, fix that. I actually feel like the boat is getting bigger and it's getting more refined. It's getting tighter. It's getting faster. It's just moving in the right direction. And so I think that's you guys kind of came around it from the different angles, but it really it shows to the testament of the people, not only, having Mark and I engaging, but bringing you, Ravi, and Larson, and Kirsten, and Lapik, and Alan, and all these people. I think it really shows that when you got the right people on the bus can really move at different strengths. So, well, thanks guys for your time. I appreciate it. We'll do this again.
Thank you.
All right.